Other observations of that? Did you like it? Looks beautiful. What about the second piece? Any feelings on that? People tend to feel more strongly about it. Okay. What impressions? Was it tonal?
No.
Okay. Any other sense of it? Yeah, cool.
I thought they were contrasting in their sort of attitude, like the first one sort of languid and deep, and the other one sort of almost bouncy and sporadic.
Interesting. Who do you think wrote the first one? Who's a guess?
Arvo Pärt.
Arvo Pärt, okay. Any other guesses? Does anybody know the piece and is being good about not saying about it? Okay, great. And who do you think wrote the second piece? No, it was the choir coming in. It was very Cajun. Any guesses? Who wrote the second piece? Les? Okay. They're actually both by Arnold Schoenberg. Written 20 years apart. The first is a tone poem for a string sextet called Verklärte Nacht, Transfigured Night. And the last piece that we heard is from 1923, his Opus 23 5-piano piece, is the last one of the waltz. And I kind of want to talk about today, how do we get from one of these things to the other? Like, Arnold, what happened? It was so beautiful. And before we do that, we need to sort of talk about what's happening in Europe, particularly in Germany, at the end of the 19th century. Arnold Schoenberg was born in 1874. So he's sort of at the tail end, the last quarter of the century. And if you can imagine yourself in 1800, you wake up, you go out your door, what you see on the street is more or less the same thing that someone 300 years before you saw on the street in the morning. Almost no change. There are little things, you know, the printing press and gas lights and things like that. But not so different. Now, if you fast forward 100 years, imagine that you were born in 1800, you live until 1900, you go outside in the morning, to a completely different world. So this is a sketch of London circa 1800. And then here's a wonderful painting from 1900. You can see the smokestacks, the coal. If you think about it, in that 100 years, we have the development of locomotive, photography, phonography, sanitation, discovery of germs and how germs work, the automobile, the beginnings of cinema, and everyone knew that manned flight was not far away. So we think about, you know, how things have changed from 1900 to now. And really, when you think about it, everything that was in existence in 1900 is pretty much in existence now, with the exception of the internet and television. But this is a completely different landscape. And it's really important to think about how that affects the mindset of someone coming up during this time. You see these advancements get closer and closer together, and one becomes aware of sort of the sense of history and the sense of progress, that one thing leads to another. And you see in the writings of Karl Marx, in the writings of Wagner, in the writings of Nietzsche, that there's this idea of historical destiny, that we're all leading in one direction. People disagree on what the direction is. But if you were to imagine, like during Mozart and Bach's time, someone talking about music of the future, unheard of. They're all about the here and now. This is what we're doing now. This is what we do tomorrow. We don't worry about tomorrow's today. But that's not the case at this time. So there's this sense of progress, this sense of destiny. And then at the same time, you can see the bleakness of this image. There's this counteracting sense of incredible nostalgia and loss. The Black Forest had been cut down. All the cities were like this, completely covered in coal. And it all happened so fast. What have we done? Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but we're not sure. So there's sort of this kind of a schizophrenic idea of where they fit into history. And there's also a political element at work here. So if you think about the first half of the 19th century, it's a very tumultuous time here. French Revolution, a couple of them. Wars between France and Russia, wars with the United States in 1812. There's a Second French Revolution in 1848, and an almost German Revolution in 1849. And then after that, things calmed down. And things calmed down mostly because of a very complicated series of treaties and alliances between all these various countries that got more and more complicated with each year as these powers kind of consolidated their control and tried to prevent war, for the next year. As long as we can get through this year without war, we'll be okay. So we'll sign the form. All right? At the center of this is the Central Alliance between Germany and Austro-Hungary. And you can see here, they're right in the middle of all this. And it's kind of a threatening position if you're France or if you're Russia, particularly if you're England. Germany has all this coastal territory here. They've got colonies all over the world. Of course, the British Isles have colonies all over the world, very colonial empire. And they see that there's this consolidation of power here. So the British start buying guns and building warships. And the Germans say, whoa, they're buying guns and building warships. So they start doing it. And then the French, who are allied with Russia on the other side, start doing the same thing. And before we know it, all of Europe is armed to the teeth. It's the first modern arms race. And everyone knows that war is coming. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand in 1914 was just like the match that lit the haystack. Everyone knew it was coming. And so there's this kind of anxiety about this. Okay? So we've got this technological conflict, we've got this military conflict, and then there's also musical conflict. Starts in the mid-century, between, who's this? Brahms and Wagner. Right. And now, Wagner is, as you know, let's start with Brahms. Brahms, the classicist, the conservative, amazing mind, but we associate him with what kind of music? Absolute music or program music?
Absolute.
And what is absolute music? Yeah, music that it doesn't represent something else. It doesn't represent a sunset or a sword or a dragon. It's itself. Okay? And Wagner is mostly known for what kinds of pieces? Well, what symphonies or string quartets or operas? Yeah, more than operas, music dramas. We call them operas because opera companies perform them, but he imagined this incredible fusion of art, visual art, dance, theater, and music together. This Gesamtkunstwerk, this total art. In 1860, he wrote an essay called Music of the Future. This kind of goes back to what I was talking about, this idea of progress. He's imagining what will happen in the future. And he talks about ancient Greece, the Greek tragedies that supposedly had musical elements and artistic elements, and how that to him was this pinnacle of art making. And then that kind of dissolved for various reasons. And he's trying to bring this about again. And he writes that the purpose for unifying the arts is for tearing the public away from its daily concerns in order to behold the highest and deepest of which the human mind is capable. So heavy stuff, not light fare from Wagner. And the way that Wagner wants to communicate this sort of thing is through portrayal, musical and dramatic portrayal of transfiguration. Transfiguration is the transformation from the everyday to the divine, or the individual to the cosmic. So from the self to the universal. It's an outward bound sort of thing. And Wagner and his Liszt and other acolytes are thinking that if we can portray this, and we can get people to take this kind of drama seriously, then they'll be that much more serious about their own life, and the German culture can have this sort of transfiguration and find itself at the apex of human achievement. And we can see where this idea leads, 100 years down, or not even 100 years, 70 years down the line, with the Nazis. But suffice it to say, this idea of transfiguration is something that's really important at the end of the 19th century. And after the deaths of Brahms and Wagner, this tradition was carried on by Richard Strauss. And does anyone know who this is?
Reger?
Yeah, Max Reger. Someone should have told him to take down his glasses when he was this picture day. And Reger lived, these two lived well into the middle of the 20th century. Very conservative, contrapuntal classicist. Some very dense, thorny counterpoint, but absolute music to the core. Richard Strauss, of course, the great opera and tone poem composer. So here it is that we find young Schoenberg. Born in 1874 into a very poor Jewish family, took up the violin. His family was able to afford him violin lessons, and started composing on the side. He heard music that he liked and wrote down music that was similar. And he developed a friendship with a young man who was a student of Brahms, who was just 3 years older than him, named Alexander Zemlinsky. Anybody know that name? Yes? Yeah. Zemlinsky was a really wonderful composer whose music is almost completely unknown here in the States. He emigrated here around the same time as Schoenberg during the war years, and just his career didn't take off. But Zemlinsky was Schoenberg's only composition teacher. And as a student of Brahms, he had an appreciation for that sort of organic, closed unity that is such a great hallmark of Brahms' music. But also being a young, radical composer who was exposed to the Wagner side. So Schoenberg kind of grows up with these two influences, loving Brahms for his mastery of form and his extreme care for motivic development and motivic relationships, where the small is related to the whole. And that, as we will see, it becomes sort of the linchpin of Schoenberg's style. And then Wagner, he loved for his advanced chromatic harmony and his views on drama and the importance of drama in music. But what both of these two composers have in common, this is confusing, I should go backwards. What both these two composers have in common is that their music is highly organic and highly unified. Wagner through the use of the leitmotif, which is what? What is that?
When something represents a character?
Yeah, a piece, a little motivic unit that represents a character, or a feeling, or an object, or anything, or an emotion. And those things can be layered on top of each other to create these complex, deep, dense kind of webs of meaning. So these two things are kind of coming together. So I want to look at this, one of Schoenberg's really early pieces. This piece that we just listened to, Verkehrsnacht, which is for string sextet, 2 violins, 2 violas, 2 cellos. And it's based on a poem by Richard Demel. Does anybody know that poem? No? Called Verkehrsnacht, Transfigured Night. And the poem is about a couple, we don't know whether they're married or not, man and woman, walking through the dark, and it's sort of threatening and ominous. And she has an emotional burden to bear. And through the poem, she confesses to him that she is carrying a child that is not his. And she feels terrible about it. It was a mistake, but now she has to bear it out. And the man forgives her and says, through our love, we will make this child ours, begotten by me. Thus, the child is transfigured, the threatening nature of the night is transfigured, and the relationship is transfigured. I just want to play the first section of this. It's so beautiful. You can follow along. This is Schoenberg's manuscript. I'll zoom in for you. but you can sort of hear this, like, the angst, right, in this, and then the attitude. If we were able to hear the whole thing, I wish I could play for you. This sort of outward expansion of the tortured soul into the forgiveness and redemption of the universe. I want to look at another piece around this period a little bit later. I won't be able to play it for you, but I just want to show it to you because I think it's a good representative. Is this massive song cycle called the Gura Lieder. Does anybody know this piece? Yes? Have you heard it live?
I've heard it live in Europe, actually.
Okay, I heard it in Boston several years ago, and I think everyone in Boston's there, either on stage or live. So this may be the biggest piece there is. It's just this. It's long. It's like an hour and a half long for this huge orchestra and chorus and soloists, and it's based on these Danish medieval love tragedy poems. So it's actually very, very Wagnerian in terms of its subject matter. And I just kind of want to show you. Here's the typical page from the score, and we can zoom in here. We've got 8 flutes, 5 oboes, 2 E-flat clarinets, 2 B-flat clarinets, bass clarinet, only 1 bass clarinet, 3 bassoons, 2 contrabassoons, 10 horns, 4 regular trumpets, bass trumpet, alto trombone, 4 tenor trombones, bass trombone, contrabass trombone, tuba, and 4 harps. and when it's performed, it's absolutely spectacular. But it's not done very often because it's so big. But this is sort of the culmination of this romantic, over-the-top, out there attitude that was begun by Liszt and Wagner, and then through Strauss, and then into Schoenberg. But then things began to change in the middle of the first decade, and a lot of that is due to this guy, Sigmund Freud, who was also in Vienna at the same time as all these really important composers. And there are certain times in history where people from different disciplines hang out together and share ideas in certain places. And during the first decade of the 20th century, the coffee houses of Vienna were one of these places. Mahler was going out, Schoenberg was going out, Freud, Kokoschka, we'll see one of his paintings later. All of these different artists and writers and thinkers were all just chatting. And all these people were Freud's patients. And we all know Freud is one of the instigators of this idea of the subconscious, and that there's all this inner turmoil and stuff. So we see in the art and the music of this time, particularly with Schoenberg and then his 2 students, Berg and Webern, this inward turn towards self-inspection and some very abstract, highly chromatic, violent music. So this is an influence. Also, remember, all across Europe, there's this arms race, which escalated exponentially during this first decade. I think I read a statistic that military spending between 1905 and 1910 went up by 50% in Germany. It's a huge investment in military things. So everybody knows that this war is coming, this anxiety is growing. And I want to show you a painting of the time. This is by Oskar Kokoschka. This is called The Errant Knight. This is from 1914, so it's a little bit of a later example, but it's such a great painting I wanted to show it to you. Let me back up a little bit. You remember Zemlinsky, Schoenberg's teacher? Well, he dated, for a long time, a woman named Alma Schindler, who dumped him for Gustav Mahler and became Alma Mahler. Well, Mahler died at the end of the first decade, and she sort of kind of made the rounds with a lot of the important artists in Vienna at the time, and writers. And one of these people was Oskar Kokoschka, the great painter. And this painting happened after he got her pregnant and she had an abortion without telling him, without talking to him about it. So you can see, yeah, you can see well enough. This is him, the self-portrait. You can see he's wearing this armor here. And it's hard to see, but this is a sphinx here. And the head is Alma Mahler. And then you can see this troubled seascape back here, and this skeleton with wings flying. It's a very painful image, sort of nightmarish. Kind of goes away from the realist paintings that we're seeing even a couple decades earlier. So Schoenberg is seeing this, and his music is getting more and more chromatic. And he's realizing that he's having a harder and harder time expressing these deep inner subconscious feelings through tonal harmony. And so in 1908, he announces, I'm done with it. And he proclaims the emancipation of the dissonance. And in 1941, he writes about how this happened. He says, "The ear had gradually become acquainted with a great number of dissonances, and so had lost the fear of their sense-interrupting effect. No one longer expected preparations of Wagner's dissonances or resolution of Strauss's discords. One was not disturbed by Debussy's non-functional harmonies or by the harsh counterpoint of later composers, such as Reger. This state of affairs led to a freer use of dissonances comparable to the classic composer's treatment of diminished seventh chords." So here we see this idea of history, like one thing leads to another. This is inevitable. The treatment of diminished seventh chords, which could precede and follow any other harmony, consonant or dissonant, as if there were no dissonance at all. And he goes on, "What distinguishes dissonance from consonance is not a greater or lesser degree of beauty, but a greater or lesser degree of comprehensibility. In my treatise on harmony, which he wrote in 1922, I presented the theory that the dissonant tones appeared later among the overtones, for which reason the ear is less intimately acquainted with them. The term emancipation of the dissonance refers to its comprehensibility, which is considered equivalent to the consonants' comprehensibility. In other words, you should be just as able to comprehend a minor second as a perfect fifth. A style based on this premise treats dissonance like consonance and renounces total center." So I want to talk a little bit about what does he mean, beauty versus comprehensibility. So let me play something for you. Raise your hand if you think this is not beautiful. Raise your hand. Everyone thinks this is pretty? Okay. Which is more pretty, this or this? Who thinks A? Who thinks B? Right. Why? It's the same error. Because it's placed in context. Okay, it's an added second in a major chord, which gives it greater comprehensibility. Another one. Raise your hand if you think this is not beautiful. Yeah. What intervals is? What about more beautiful? Yes, because of the context, because it becomes more comprehensible. Okay, not to belabor the point, but one more. This is a harder one to swallow. Who thinks this is beautiful? I actually love this interval. What is this? What interval is this? Okay, who thinks this is not beautiful? Some people are neutral.
Just that.
Well, this is here behind the piano. Well, I mean, in the context, the interval is different, but the interval is the same. The interval is the same, and it has the same meaning. And that's what Schoenberg said. And you shouldn't have to clothe it in things that make it pretty in order for that raw meaning to be brought out. And I want to talk a little bit more about functional harmony and how that kind of got in his way too. Here's just a little bit from the prelude to Tristan by Wagner from 1865. It's so good. I think you'll love it. Sorry. Isn't that painful? Okay. What kind of deceptive cadence was that?
Deceptive.
Yeah, deceptive. Right, right. And then what was the non-chord tone? Anybody know from the root of our deceptive chord that we landed on the sixth? This. It's a tritone. Where does one expect the tritone to go? Up or down? Right, yeah. So it's reaching up, but the fact that it resolves down is so poignant, right? It's like you can't quite get it. And Schoenberg writes that Wagner doesn't have to prepare his dissonances, but he prepares it perfectly. Let me play it like a non-deceptive cadence. Sorry, it's a big first chord. Okay. From below, and then it's just an appositeur from the top. I love you tomorrow, But so Schoenberg is thinking, well, but I love this. But I don't want to have to do all the stuff before that. So maybe I don't need to. Maybe I don't even have to resolve it. Maybe I can just hang out there. And that has some meaning, right? That has some potential. And sure enough, we see that a reduction of this, perfect fourth, tritone in the top. We know what that's called. Anybody? Yeah.
Viennese trichord.
A Viennese trichord, one of the favorite sonorities of Schoenberg and Weber, kind of arises out of this distillation of this sort of emotive effect to just its pure element. Now, I have a question for you. So if we get rid of key, and all dissonances are equal to consonances, what do we lose in music? Think about tonal music. How a piece is built in tonal music. Yes?
You lose a hierarchy.
You lose a hierarchy, and another word for that is you lose the form. Right? Our Western tradition is based on tonal forms. So he's got a problem here. What do? We have we can't modulate because there's no key. So he's dealing with this. Berg's dealing with this. Weber is dealing with this. And sure enough, he writes, the foremost characteristics of these early pieces from this time are their extreme expressiveness, right? And their extreme brevity. So they're all very, very short, because they're these little meditations, and then because you can't really develop, you can't go somewhere and then come back without going into a tonal place at that time, using the language that he had. That you're done, and you got to go on to the next piece. So I want to look at one of these first pieces from this time. Some of you probably know this. The three piano pieces, Opus 11. And this first one is based on a two-interval set, so a three-note set. Zoom in here. That is a descending third, descending minor third, and then another descending half step. So we've got B, G sharp, G, here's another B. And we see it spelled all kinds of ways. Here's another one. Look at it. Another one. Another one. There's one. Oh, too far. Okay. So this whole thing is like constructed of these, not every note, but most of the notes in this come out of this sequence. Let me just play the first. I'm going to play one more measure. Let me back up so you can see the whole. There, so you can see the whole thing. I'll play one more measure than you have, and see if you can hear this. There it is. All right. something that's working for him. But, you know, as a German, he loves structure. There's one thing that gets Germans excited, structure. So he's looking for more ways to create larger pieces. And he writes, a little later, I discovered how to construct larger forms by following a text or a poem. The differences in size and shape of its parts and the change in character and mood were mirrored in the shape and size of the composition. In other words, the composition is following the text. Mirrored in the shape and size of the composition, it is dynamics and tempo, figuration and accentuation, instrumentation and orchestration. Thus, the parts were differentiated as clearly as they had formerly been by the tonal and structural functions of harmony. So here he's passing on this, the responsibility of organization not to tonality, but to drama, to text. And the piece he's talking about in question is Pierrot Lunaire. Sorry, guys. You know this here. Old hat. Okay. It's Pierrot Lunaire, this 21-song melodrama from 1912. Does anybody know this piece? Has anyone played it? Let's talk about that. Yeah, I'm doing it right now at UCLA, so it's sort of like fresh on my mind. A little bit about this. Pierrot is a commedia dell'arte character. You know what that is? Commedia. That's a really old Italian kind of clown tradition where there are stock characters and they go through the same problems over and over again, and it's like sort of slapsticky. And it dates from the 1500s or earlier, and then kind of came into vogue again at the end of the 19th century. And Pierrot is one of these. He's the sad clown who is, he's moonstruck. So the moon, he's spent too much time looking at the moon and it's made him crazy. And he is in love with this other clown woman named Colombe. He's just crazy about her. But she has nothing, she doesn't want to do it. She's no use for him. Who's this on? But she uses Pierrot because there's another guy who is kind of into her that she's not so into. So she kind of pits Pierrot against this guy, sort of uses him. And he's a really sad character in that way. He's very alone and tortured. And so Albert Giraud, French poet, wrote 50 poems about Pierrot. Extremely grotesque, ironic, vivid poetry. And they were translated into German by Otto Hartleben. And then from the set of 50, Schoenberg chose 21 and set them for what has now become a standard combination of flute, clarinet, violin, cello, and piano, what we now call the Pierrot ensemble, because of this piece. And the flutist also plays piccolo, the clarinetist plays bass clarinet, the violinist plays viola. So it's sort of a whole lot of instruments with just a few people. And like I said before, this is a melodrama. What's a melodrama? How is it different than a song? You almost have it. Okay, a melodrama is spoken text with music. And that's nothing new. Beethoven wrote melodrama, Egmont. But it also was coming into vogue at this time even more. Everybody was kind of way into it. And this woman was sort of a big name actor at the time, and had been doing these poems with some kind of crappy music. And people were saying, Albertine, you can't be doing this, you're embarrassing yourself. You need to go to this young guy, Arnold Schoenberg. He will give you some really good music for this. So he wrote it for these instruments, and then the speaker is not a singer, but a Sprechstimme, which is speak singing. So all the rhythms are very precisely notated, but the pitches are not. It's sort of relative. So there's this up and down, you'll hear it, kind of sighing, very eerie sound that the singer makes. And I just want to look at two of these songs. The first one is Night, and it's a Passacaglia. What's a Passacaglia?
Variations on a chord progression or bass line.
On a bass line, right. So continuous bass line's like a chaconne, sort of same idea. And is it a new form or an old form? Really old. really old. So sonata form's not working, right? Tonality's out. But some of these things are still fruitful for Schoenberg. So he writes a Passacaglia, and this is sort of the same as Opus 11, on these three notes. E natural, G, B flat. That were those intervals. And they're respelled here. There they are again. There they are again. In the cello and bass clarinet. Bass clarinet sounds a minor ninth, or just think a major second and an octave, lower than written. There it is again. Now spelled in the bass clarinet. And there it is again in the cello. And we see it used in inversion here, where the last note is kicked up an octave. We see it spelled vertically and inverted here. And then we see it used canonically in inversion. You see this whole thing. So the whole piece is based on this. And it takes a genius like Schoenberg to take such a small thing and make such a beautiful piece out of it. And I want to read you the text. Black, gigantic butterflies have blotted out the shining sun. Like a sorcerer's sealed book, the horizon sleeps in silence. From the murky depths, forgotten vapors rise to murder memory. Black, gigantic butterflies have blotted out the shining sun. And from heaven towards earth, sinking down on heavy pinions, all unseen descend the monsters to the hearts of men below here. Black, gigantic butterflies. Let me just play some of this for you. I've been talking too much, so I need to move on. Let's go back to the beginning here. Oh, sorry, Ben. Start again. Isn't it eerie? It's Christine Schaefer with Ensemble Intercontemporain Pierre Boulez. I want to show you just one other song from this cycle. Let me skip through here. Has anyone used this before? This is called Prezi. And they're not paying me anything, but it's the most amazing online, it's free presentation program. It's my first Prezi. I'm very excited about it. This is from towards the end of the song cycle. Der Mondfleck, the moon fleck. And the text is, with a snowy fleck of shining moonlight on the backside of his smart new frock coat. So sets forth Pierrot, one balmy evening in pursuit of fortune and adventure. Suddenly, something is wrong with his appearance. He looks round and round, and then he finds it. There's a snowy fleck of shining moonlight on the backside of his smart new frock coat. Hang it, thinks he, a speckle of plaster. Wipes and wipes, but he can't make it vanish. On he goes. His pleasure has been poisoned. Rubs and rubs until it's almost morning at a snowy fleck of shining moon. So there's this moonbeam coming through the crack in the wall of the window that's on his coat. It's just frantically scratching at it all night long. And the way this is represented in music is the text and the piano part is through composed. But the winds and strings are a very complicated palindrome that centers right there in the middle of the 10th bar. You can see here how it's, backwards and forwards. So the piece begins, look at that carefully, just as it ends. And that portrays this passage of the moon through the night until the next morning, when he still hasn't gone out because he's been rubbing at his coat all day. Okay, I'd like to move on a little bit, since we're coming towards the end of our time together. So this was in 1912, and the years following that were sort of a slow period for Schoenberg, partially because of the war, but mostly because he was trying to solve the same serious musical problem, which is how do I construct and organize large-scale atonal works without having to rely on text as a foundation, or without going back to a tonally driven form. And he goes around and around about this. And he finally comes up with it. Let me skip through here. Sorry, I can't play this for you. I'm sorry if I make you dizzy. Okay. He finally comes up with it with the 12-tone row. This, what we now call serialism, where he takes all 12 pitches, and you use all 12 before you can use them again. And you can invert them, and you can do any kind of transposition of them, so that you end up the language of pitches that you can use forwards and backwards and upside down and backwards. And then you still have this relationship, this pattern of notes, of intervals, that can serve not only as a generator of motives and of melody, but also as a replacement for key. So let's say we begin with this row, and we go on somewhere, and he ends up using this row. In a structural sense, he could realistically write a sonata form where he recapitulates to the primary row. And it's not tonal because we're getting all 12 pitches equally, and each note is sounding exactly once before the next one sounds. So I have struck gold with this. I can write long pieces, they're atonal, and I can make these dissonant as I want, and as expressive as I want. And just incidentally, if you're ever making one of these, the way to check that it's right is that the first note is the diagonal like that. Don't ask me why that is. That's for the next lecture. So in the first piece to use this fully is Opus 23, the last movement, the waltz. And here's the primary row, these pitches, which were incidentally the pitches that I just showed you in that matrix. And if we go here to the first page, we can see, there they are, in order, in the right hand. There they are in the left hand, starting on the sixth note, going 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got the row happening twice in this first system. There's again. There's again. And the great thing about this piece is because it's sort of a first experiment, he doesn't use inversion, he doesn't use transposition. It's the same row over and over again, so you can keep finding it. There it is again, and again, and again, and again. Okay. And then you can keep going through the whole piece like that. So I want to play this for you and see if you can, I don't know what he's getting at in terms of structure. Start can see here over the course of 20 years how these cultural influences combined with his musical search for expression have led him from this like dyed-in-the-wool Wagnerian romanticism to this starch, crisp modernism, very regimented. A journey that doesn't really make sense unless you look at it in that light. Are there any questions?
I'm sorry, we should probably adjourn.
All right. Thank you so much.